Welcome to another episode of My Solopreneur Life in the season where I'm talking about confidence in selling and turning fears into clients. Today, I have the first part of a two-part conversation with Eric Shulman. Now, let me give you a little history around me and Eric. Way back when, I was probably in the maybe fourth or fifth year of my business, my creative agency, and I just struggled with sales. A lot of it had to do with my thinking about what sales was, my lack of experience, and because I'm such a nurturing, kind of empathetic type person, I end up doing too much free consulting and not really being structured or having a process around the actual sales conversation. I wanted to have Eric on because Eric was the one who taught me how to sell. And I signed up at the time when we first met. He was a sales trainer for Sandler, which is one of many sales programs that are out there. And I never met anybody who was more suited to be a teacher, to teach sales in a way that people really got it versus here's how this works and here's the methodology and step 1, 2, 3. Eric is a great storyteller. And this is why I know he's such a good teacher. First of all, he got through my thick head, right? In the program, the way he delivers the information, he gives so much context. He tells so many stories. And one thing he did really well that he still does, he actually did it in the conversation that you're about to hear, he'll actually role play. And the role playing can be so powerful when you're doing it with someone who is obviously trying to teach you, but understands the sales process, relationships, how people think. And he gives so many really great tips and ways that you can look at sales. I mean, even I was like, oh gosh, I never thought of it that way. And I worked with the guy for several years taking his classes and such. And we've remained friends since then. And I still think of him when I think of sales, and I remember the things that he taught me. I may not always execute on them, but I definitely remember them because they are very helpful. And just having this conversation that I had was a great reminder of some things that I actually have forgotten. I'm glad we were able to do that. I hope you enjoy this episode and this conversation. Eric's a trip. You're going to really enjoy the colorful stories that he has, but underneath there are some great lessons that he imparts. So you're going to love this first part, this first conversation that we have. It's kind of all over the place, but Eric drops some real wisdom in here that I think every solopreneur can benefit from. So let's get started. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Well, hello, Eric. Thanks, and welcome to My Solopreneur Life. We are going to have such a great conversation about sales, prospecting, networking, and all that stuff. My solopreneur listener can get super excited about getting out there and doing some sales. What I'd like to start with is let my listener know what work you're doing today and kind of like some of the things you're excited about in your practice.
I work specifically with two groups of people right now, Terry. I've been a sales trainer, as you know, for years, but I work with solopreneurs like you, hence the name of my company, consultantscansell.com, because consultants have trouble selling. And I also work with teams of people, people that are professionals, that are really good at sales, but they want to go to the next level, sort of like an executive coach for those that are already good at sales. And as a beginner coach, to lead them along the way, to make them comfortable with the idea of selling. Because unfortunately, a lot of people think sell is a four-letter word that you don't use in polite company. But I ask people, are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have a boss? You're in sales. People don't realize that selling is not just business. It's also where we're going to have dinner tonight. There's a sale involved there. You got to change the idea of what sales actually is.
And you certainly did that for me, that's for sure. What I really like for us to talk about today is to help my listener to reduce their fears around sales and making a good impression or whatever barriers are in the way, as well as increasing their confidence and making it fun. Because for me, I love getting to know people in their business. And sometimes I spend so much time asking questions that I forget to actually ask for business.
Well, you should never have to ask for the business. And I love the idea of it being fun. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy learning about them and their business. The whole key, Terry, is you got to get rid of the pressure. In sales, I'm being pressured that I want to make a sale today. And if that's in the back of my mind or in the front of my mind, I'm going to come off as salesy to the other person. They're going to feel that pressure. And what happens is we tend to put up a wall when you and I, when any of us engage with salespeople. Part of what we have to be good at to be good at sales or business development is we got to be good at just getting people comfortable enough that they'll lower their defenses and actually talk to us. The key to sales is to get people comfortable with you almost instantly, regardless of what you're selling, whether it's a medical practice, whether it's a professional services, or anything in between, you've got to get people comfortable. As a doctor, I think of it as bedside manner. You're not going to get undressed for a doctor you're not comfortable with, okay? Neither am I.
True.
Well, think about this. In sales, in business, people have to admit to you or I that they are failing in some way in their business or in their life. It's difficult for people to admit failure. So we have got to get them so comfortable with us very, very quickly. A lot of psychology involved in that. We're 5, 10 minutes into the conversation. I've actually had people say to me, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I just met you. That's the degree of bonding that has to take place. I call it building radical empathy with people. Well, people realize within a couple of minutes, she's different. He's different than the others. I feel like I can talk to them. Maybe I should tell them what's going on. And that's where you actually begin to figure out together whether or not you have a solution for them, whether or not they even have a problem you can address.
That's true. Yes, that diagnosing process is best held through very probing questions. And one thing I notice when I work with my clients is they have a habit of just staying on the surface. They're like a generalist from the standpoint of what questions they're asking their prospects. And what ends up happening is they end up coming off sounding like every other sales person or consultant that's asking for business. And there's no depth. And I love your terminology of radical empathy because that speaks so much, especially in the age of AI, where people really are seeking out connection, humanness,
Connect.
that emotional intelligence that we hear everybody talking about. We see less and less of it exhibited as more people turn to AI, turn to automation, turn to having the virtual assistant do things for them. And nothing bothers me more than having to try to get through those barriers to the real person so I can have that question.
What people don't realize is people buy from people. Companies do not buy
Mhm.
from companies. So there is some sort of a personal connection, whether it's a disembodied voice on the phone. I remember years ago when I was in the direct marketing business, there was a woman named Carolyn who worked for a big company up in Atlanta, RL Polk, big mailing list and compiler. And Carolyn and I did millions and millions of names worth of business over a 5, 6, 8 year period, never saw each other face to face. And we were
That's
friends.
something.
We would talk to each other all the time. I would be working, she'd work with me on stuff. I remember years later, I got to meet her at a conference, and it was like we saw each other and we instantly hugged each other. You've got to have that kind of relationship with people. And the reason that you said earlier, but people don't ask those probing questions, and you're going to love this. Most people want to be liked by their prospects. And if I ask you tough questions, you won't like me. So you've got to get rid of the need to be liked. That's different than being likable. I'm a likable guy, but I don't need you to like me. My job is to ask you uncomfortable questions in such a gentle fashion that you'll actually answer them.
That truly is an art, though, Eric. It really is. And that's something that I've always admired. You have honed that craft so well in your language in the way that you trained me in Sandler. and continue to provide so much insight to people who really need it. So I love everything you're saying. It made me think of a lunch I went to last week. I had recently met a woman, and another one was introduced to me through that woman. And we got on a Zoom call and we were like saying, oh, we lived in the same, like next door to each other when we grew up. We stayed in the same dormitory in college. And we had all these intersections, and it was just remarkable. I think it might be a little easier for women to do it than men, like a woman to woman, because there's this like kind of, I don't know, bond that women have about sharing personal things or
Well,
just their life.
what it is men don't let their guards down. And if I can say one thing to the men that are out there, guys, you have to learn how to nurture people. Nurturing is not natural for men, it is natural for many women. I am not a nurturing guy, but in order to make a lot of money in my life, I have learned to be nurturing. Okay. So the three most important words in real estate are location, location, location. Three most important words in sales are nurture, nurture, nurture.
Interesting. To finish my little story about these connections, we physically got together for lunch in Orlando last week on Friday, and we instantly hugs, like you said, you hugged, and I think that that is very possible. A lot of people say, "Oh, Zoom, it's so impersonal, blah blah blah." Well, that's the reality of business today, and you can start to create those types of bonds that when you do meet in person, if you're able to, it's incredible. And there's so much land that you've already covered. I love that aspect about being able to develop that.
Can we talk about Zoom and virtual communication because it's such a big
Absolutely.
people think that a medium like this, being on Zoom, you and I, is impersonal. Well, it is if you're not paying attention to the other person. There's an awful lot of body language and facial expression involved. One of the things we need to get very good at in sales and in life is reading what's called micro expressions.
Mm,
Micro expressions are the poker tells. There's a gentleman named Dr. Paul Ekman who studied this for years. He literally studied people's eyebrows in Brooksville, in Brooklyn, and in Borneo, and found out that people have the exact same set of reactions to surprise, fear, anger, disgust. Their face contorts the same way. And a lot of times we
interesting.
have just a fraction of like a little bit of surprise with the eyebrows or a little downturn with the mouth or a tiny little smile last a 15th to a 25th of a second. So part of what you have to do to make Zoom, to make virtual communication a more personal medium, is to treat it like you're in the room with people. Cut out this other sound. Don't be looking at the other screens. Don't have your phone on.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
The key is that all of this technology existed before the pandemic. We weren't taking advantage of it. I have been training on camera since 2008, 2009. We've had cameras in the training room when I had the
Hmm.
office here in Orlando. So I'm very used to doing it, and there's an art and a science to it. Face-to-face selling, phone selling, you're lacking the visual element. It's all tonality. 83% of your communication on the phone is not the words, it's the tonality. And people
Interesting.
don't understand that. So part of it is you have to understand the science of communication.
I'm telling you, Eric, you just got so much in that head of yours.
It's spilling out. It's too full right
It's spilling out all over the place. Let me give you a little example of I'll take one of my prospective clients or the people that I've been coming across recently in my business are it's interesting. There's like a pattern of this executive who's been a tenured corporate C-suite or senior director or VP, and they are being riffed or they take packages to get out in their possibly in their mid to late 50s, early 60s. And they're like, this is it. This is the opportunity for me to do my own thing, want to leverage my expertise. 99% of the time, and there's a guy I follow on social media that does training for very specific type of person who literally takes what they did in corporate and wants to continue doing it as a consultant. And that's fine because they have vast experience and so on. It makes perfect sense. But many times they do it the same way they did it in corporate. And then there's this big gap in the sales slash networking slash prospecting effort, even putting a proposal together because they always had resources in the corporate environment to do those things for them, to bring them sales opportunities. Maybe they just put together a scope or they led a team that did it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios. So, what I'd like for you to talk about is what are some of the things that they first have to take a look at? Let's say they have 10,000 people on LinkedIn that they're connected with. And let's say it's about 60% quality, which is really good for LinkedIn. What are like three main things that you can advise that particular scenario to that newbie consultant, newbie solopreneur, as far as how they should look at their ability to prospect and sell what they have?
Terry, they're not a professional at those things.
Right.
What they're a professional at is they're a professional at being an engineer, being an HR person, being a district manager, name whatever it is. And they're very, very good at that, being a logistics communication person. Whatever they did, they were good at. And what happens is when I'm good at something in a company, I get brought assignments, I get brought people that need to work with me, they hand the client to me, and I fix the problem. What they're missing is the business development side. Now they're sitting at the same desk, only it's at home. They have the same level of expertise, but no one's delivering projects to them. And they not only don't know how to go out there, it's kind of scary because what happens is people say, well, why should I talk to you? I've got somebody I'm already using. Well, because
Mhm.
I'm good at what I do. Well, the guy I'm using is good at what he or she does too. And they don't know how to deal with any of that. They also are not good at dealing with rejection. The word no is a word that your mother taught you to hate in the first 5 years of your life because she screamed it at you. Okay? So we learn to hate the word no. And when someone who's not used to getting no's starts making calls and getting no's, even polite no's, it affects their ego. It affects their confidence. When you start talking about what you do, people normally aren't going to talk to you. You have to talk about the problems that they're having. That's a whole different methodology. Rather than me saying, look, my training does this and that and the other thing, I talk about the fact, look, Terry, I deal with people who are very good at what they do, but the one piece they're missing is the business development side. They're either not picking up the phone or they're picking it up and failing miserably. If they do get appointments, they're not with the right people and they're turning out proposals that just aren't turning into business. Do you know anybody who's dealing with issues like that? Notice I never pointed at them. I asked for someone else that might be having those problems. What I've
See.
done is I've opened the door where they can say, well, what about me? I'm dealing with that too. And then you actually have to look surprised and go, you? Really? Why are you having trouble with that? And they will then explain to you exactly why they're having trouble with the things you just laid out.
You set the stage, correct.
They are now convincing you that they need help. You're not convincing them of anything. Most people work too hard at sales. It's interesting. When the pandemic hit, after I sold my training franchise, I had a 2 year non compete and I had to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my life. And I realized I'm a sales guy and I'm a trainer. And so I had to redefine my training, Terry. So when the pandemic hit and I had to sit back for 2 years and do nothing, I examined, I said, how do I actually sell? And I broke it down into four basic steps and I call it truth based selling. What you do is you create a place where you can talk with somebody and together figure out what the truth is. The truth is they either need what you have or they don't need what you have in any situation. So if my purpose in having a conversation, if your purpose in having a conversation with somebody is let's figure out which of these two situations is true. If you don't need what I have, that's fine. You and I can still be friends. And if you do need what I have, you'll be very happy that we had the conversation. There's no way you can lose. But you've got to get people to be honest with you in order to do this. I came up with a term back in the 80s for this, back before I was even a trainer. I was just running businesses. I call it moving around the desk, where you go from talking to somebody like you and I are to 5 minutes later, they realize you're sitting next to them, looking at the problem through their eyes like you're on their team. Not trying to figure out if you can sell them, but trying to figure out if you can actually help them. Because once they look over and they realize you're sitting next to them, they say, she's actually trying to help me. I'll tell her everything. I'll talk to this one. So that's what you have to do. You move from being a peddler or a vendor to being a consultant or trusted advisor in a matter of minutes. And you do this by the scope and the quality of questions that you ask. Part of it is you got to understand the client, understand enough about their business that you can ask one or two questions where they go, oh, I'll talk to her. So if you want to
Interesting.
give some advice to your people, learn to craft a good question that is not sales oriented, that makes them realize you understand the stuff they deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I
When
love
you
that.
do that, now you're the one they want to talk to.
Hmm.
Now they
Yeah.
bring you in and say, let me tell you what's really going on, and then they try and figure it out with you.
I've always found that because I'm naturally curious and I have a high degree of like nurturing and empathy. And in fact, I had a friend one time tell me, says, your heart is too big for your business, Terry. You just spend so much time like free consulting. And I got that term from you, where I'm like, well, have you tried this or whatever? And most of my new prospects that I have those early conversations with, when I hear someone say, that's a really good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. That's like a bell rings for me because I'm like, I've got something and I lean in and they lean in. And it's conducting an inquiry. And I love interviewing people. I love exploring what their experience is and where they're struggling in their business because I have a high desire, not necessarily to make a sale, but to actually help them. And like you say, come around and sit next to them. So that so aligns with how I approach sales.
Terry, you and I talked about having fun. My corporate and personal vision statement is 6 words: have fun, help people, make money. Or
I like that.
have fun, help people make money, which is what you and I do for a living. Okay.
Yes,
So it works with and without the comma. Uh,
exactly. I like that. I
yeah,
never looked at it that way, but
with
that's
and without.
that's a good distinction.
And when you're there to truly help people, people figure that out pretty quickly. You're not trying to sell them, you're trying to figure out if you can help me. Yeah. All right. Let me tell you what's really going on. And that's where you get to the truth. I've actually had them get up and close the door because they had to talk about some of the people that work for them that weren't doing their job.
Interesting.
I've had conversations where you're 15 minutes into the conversation, they go, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I just met you.
Yeah, you
If
mentioned.
you're uncomfortable, we can stop. I've never had anybody say, let's stop. They've always said, no, 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 I got to talk to somebody about it. And for some reason, I feel like I can talk to you.
It's almost like a therapy session. I've actually had prospects tell me that, like, "I feel like I'm in a therapy session with you,
No,
Terry." I'm like,
It is.
"Well."
It's the exact same science that's used in therapy.
Mhm.
You said something earlier about being curious. Anybody who's seen Glengarry Glen Ross or any sales movie knows that ABC means always be closing. I've always taught it as always be curious. Well, why are you having that problem? How come you can't fix it? You're a smart person. How come your team couldn't fix it? And the more they tell you about how they can't fix it, the more frustrated they are, and the more they start to look to you for help. Well, can you help? And the only thing you can tell them at that point is maybe. I've helped other people. I don't know if you have the budget for this. Could we talk a little bit about the money? And you then have to move into talking about money with people, which is uncomfortable. Why? Because your
Yes.
mother told you don't ask
For
people.
both.
Your mother taught you don't ask people how much things cost. It's impolite. And so you have to learn to be not uncomfortable talking about money, sometimes with lots and lots of zeros. If you can get people to monetize or dollarize what their problems cost them, you can figure out whether or not it makes sense for them to fix it. If my solution is 10 grand and you got $1 million problem, I'm cheap. If my solution is 10 grand, you got $1,000 problem, you shouldn't do it. Even if you got a $12,000 problem, unless it's repetitive, you maybe shouldn't do it. But at least a 2 or 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 ROI, now they're saying, all right, that makes sense.
Definitely. And, for me, it's almost like there's a misconception for a lot of people who have not really had any type of sales training or sales capacity where they've had to use true sales skills to develop business. And that misconception are all these things that we're talking about. So, Eric, what I'd like to do is I'd like to pause right now because this is such a great conversation. And in the next segment, which will be the next episode, what I'd love for us to do is give my listener a very practical set of things that they can do to learn how to hone these specific skills when it comes to prospecting, growing their network, and just getting out there and trying it on. All right.
You mean we can take some time and actually give them some specific steps to follow? We'll do that?
Imagine that.
That'll be great.
Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt if this episode had a prompt and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one. Bye.